If you like Bible trivia, do you know which miracle is listed in all four Gospels? The one that is listed in all four Gospels? Do you know it is the same miracle that we often, I think, mislabel? Do you know which one I'm talking about? I invite you to Matthew 14 if you want to read along with me, or you can listen. Do you remember where we left the story, where Matthew has left Jesus? The news must have been hard to hear and heavy to bear. The disciples of John came to Jesus and told him his relative, the righteous messenger John, had been killed, beheaded by Herod. The disciples had a dutifully job to do. They did it well, I suppose. The headless body was put into the ground. Now they've told Jesus that their beloved mentor is gone, and some figure, and probably so, that those disciples of John became on this day followers of Jesus. That's where we left the story. That's why we'll start now in chapter 14, verse 13, as it says this: when Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Jesus needed some time alone. He needed some time away, and I think we understand that. We also need to get away, especially after something like that has happened. He got in a boat and he withdrew from everyone. I figure the apostles are there with him, but they have an understanding. They don't bother the master. They won't bother their friend. He needs some time alone. He probably just needed some time to be sad, to think back, to reflect, to pray, to clear his head, to remember what he came to do. Wouldn't surprise me if his mind went to his own death that was coming too soon. He followed John in birth and in death, in some ways similar to John. Not so much the way they died, but at the hands of those who delighted in killing them. Jesus' time of solitude is not going to last long. It never does. He gets away and the crowds find him. He leaves them behind and they come to get with him again. And even when he's in a boat, he's got to get to land somehow, somewhere. And when he gets there, well, they're there. This is what it says. Hearing of this, Jesus leaving, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. So they are figuring from where he left to where he would be going, and they walked the long way around because they didn't have a boat, and they got to him. They found him, and there he is. When he gets there, they are there. There they are. He steps out onto the land, and they're waiting for him like needy children need their mom. You moms know how that is, I know. And some of you may have to think back to those days when young children hung on to you. They grab a leg and you drag them behind. They grab an arm and don't let go. They squeeze your neck so tight you think you're gonna choke. It's nice, but it can be too much. Mom fixes lunch and the kids are right there, and mom folds laundry and the kids are right there, and she puts some toys away in a room and walks up to another room and cleans that room, and there they are, and she cleans up a spill and gets in the fridge and starts making dinner, and there they are. She finally, in one moment, plops down on an empty chair in an empty room, just needing a little time to be by herself, with herself, checks a post, reads a letter, sits in silence, catches up on a show, but before her bottom hits the chair, her children have found her, and they plop themselves in her lap because they need just a little more time with mom. Every mother knows the joy of children and the exhaustion of them. It's a reality every mother knows. She wants to be with them, and she would love to be alone too. It's great to be needed, but it can be overwhelming. You can fully love your children with every part of your being and still wish they would disappear just for a while. It's natural to feel that way. You're normal if you desire time with them and time away from them at the same time. And it would be normal for Jesus right about now to be feeling what we feel. He just had a little time on his own, time to mourn, time to be sad, time to wish things were different, but they're not, and to accept them again. Maybe they didn't appreciate Jesus, but here they are, and they have been healed, and they want to be healed, and more people want to be healed. The hurting, the sick, the disabled, the possessed, they need him, desperately need him. They're like children right now and don't have healthy boundaries. They just need more of him, and now that they found him, they get him, and now you may be wondering what Jesus is thinking and feeling. how he would respond. Is he like me? Is he like you? Is he like us? Verse 14, when Jesus landed and saw the large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. Compassion. He responded not by being bothered. He wasn't put out. He wasn't frustrated, feeling unappreciated by all the people. He was needed. He could do what no one else could do. They were desperate, and who could help them but him? He felt for them as even the busiest mom drops everything when her small child comes running, crying in pain. They came to him in need, and he responds with compassion and kindness. They come to be healed, and he heals them. I don't know how many hundreds there were coming. I don't know how many thousands were there by now. I know by the end there's a lot more than that, but here they are being healed. Some might have come in and some might have left, but here they are. And the day is passing, which brings on another issue. Keep reading. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late, so send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." It's late, and some people think like the sun is setting and it's nighttime now, but it may not mean that. It may just mean the time of eating dinner is over, and they're hungry. And since everybody, especially the disciples, realize we don't have food to feed them, then let's send them away. Let them go get their own food. Sounds like a good plan, but Jesus doesn't feel the same. He's got another reason maybe to challenge them with this. Verse 16, no, he replied, they do not need to go away. You, he says, you give them something to eat. I don't know how much time passes between verse 16 and 17, but they must have assessed the situation and coming up with what is obvious. So here it comes. We have here only, just, merely 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, and that's what they answered. He got the food from them, or at least the idea, and he told them what to do. I don't know what they're thinking, but I think I might know what they're thinking. If they could just show him the food, give him the food, say, here's what we have, probably he would say to them, oh, you're right, gentlemen, you are so right. This is embarrassing. I mean, this is not enough food. How could this feed everybody? This is laughable. How could we feed all these people with this? And then they all would have had a good laugh together and still sent the people away hungry. But that's not at all what he says. If they thought of every scenario, they would not have come up with this. You feed them, we don't have enough, so bring them here to me, he said. And he directed the people to sit down on the grass. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. And he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people, and they all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. So he gets the food, and he has the people sit down, and it's a deserted place, but not a desert. There's grass, and they sit down, and they wait to see what he will do. And he takes the bread and the fish, and he prays, and he looks up to heaven, and he gives thanks. Now, giving thanks for that meal would be a perfect time here in America for a heckler on the back row to shout out from the crowd, what are you thankful for? You kidding me, right? 5 loaves and 2 fish? This is a joke. I'm glad you can be thankful for your small meal, but what about us? Nobody said that. Nobody mocked. Nobody became sarcastic or desperate. Nobody walked away in disgust, I guess. Maybe they're skeptical. Maybe they don't know what's going on. Maybe they can't even see him. But I'll bet they could not have guessed where all of this was going. But here the miracle starts happening. And do you notice that Matthew doesn't even tell us it's really happening? You just kind of figure because it's a little bit subtle until you keep reading and find out it's done. Sure wish I could have been there to see it, don't you? I still to this day wonder where the miracle happened. What was it down inside of a bag, a basket? Did he reach in and pull out one and another and another? Did he break it and pass it, break it and every time he breaks it more, he has more to break and to pass? I don't know. Did the apostles watch the food just materialize out of nothing? What a sight that would have been. What a feast that would have been. I mean, maybe not for you. Fish and bread doesn't do much for me either, but they ate it and they enjoyed it. And that's not just what they had to eat, like it kept them from starving. It's all they needed to eat. They ate and they ate and they ate until somebody like my grandmother would have said, I ate too much. And still they picked up 12 basketfuls of leftovers. 12. That's an interesting number, right? 12 baskets. 12 apostles. Makes you wonder. Maybe the disciples hadn't eaten yet after all the work, so maybe it's their turn to eat. Or maybe they already ate and now they have. Just so it happens, 12, exactly 12 baskets for 12 hungry men who would be hungry later, if not today. And that's what it was. It was perfect, just perfect. Card says, if you don't engage with your imagination, you'll miss the real miracle, which was not one of abundance. The miracle was one of perfect provision. Everybody ate everything they wanted and still had exactly 12 baskets for 12 disciples to pick up. Not only could he do it, he knew exactly what was enough. Now, if you're just reading this, you may not know until now, if you've never read this before, just how big the crowd is. Back in verse 14, when it says there's a big crowd. Yeah, there is. When he first gets out of the boat, he notices the large crowd. But how big? Last verse. The number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, besides women and children. We've almost always, in my memory, labeled this the feeding of the 5,000. In the top of my Bible, there's not inspired words, but there's words. Jesus feeds the 5,000. I don't know why we say that. It's not true. But it's stuck. We say it to our kids, the feeding of the 5,000. There weren't 5,000. There were more than 5,000. Many more, I expect. What if all of those men had a girlfriend or a wife or another friend? What if every couple in that group on that hillside had a child? And in those days, you didn't have a child. What if they all had 2 or 3 or 4? It's not 5,000. It's probably more like 10,000 or maybe 15,000. 20,000 may be a more accurate number, and it could have been more than that. It makes the miracle not just incredibly wild to think that much food, but to have only 12 baskets left is incredible. He did it with precision and perfection, and it all came about because of his kindness and compassion. I figure if you've grown up in church, you've heard this story so many times you could tell me the story. Maybe some are here who haven't heard it much, or maybe this is your first. But what lessons could we draw from it? I suspect it's lessons you could draw yourself, or maybe you've heard them from other preachers 100 times over. But let me remind you of a few things before we're done. First, it's really a question for those disciples and for us. Why are we so quick to get discouraged and run out of ideas and question whether God can even bring us through this? Why do we so easily stop thinking past our own resources and give up hope for anything greater than what we can see, touch, feel, smell? Why do we forget all the ways God has delivered us through all of the impossibilities of our past and again today say, I'm just not sure He can do it this time? Why are we so slow to trust Him, to expect the impossible, and to believe that He can do more than we ask or imagine? When Jesus told the apostles to feed the crowd, I wonder how long it took them to say, well, there's nothing we can do. They very quickly decided it was hopeless. I think the reason they gave Him such a small lunch is to say, that's the best we got. As you can see, Jesus, utterly hopeless for the moment. They must have been trying to get Jesus to see how insane the reality of this is. We can't feed all these people with this. And while they're focusing on the impossible, He is surely trying to focus on the possible. Why didn't they think Jesus could do it? Immediately, from the start, before any questions. They had seen him on this same day heal the blind and the lame and the sick, cure the lepers, cast out the demons. They've watched him before raise the dead. Is a meal too much to ask? So when it came to doing something incredible, exceptional, unbelievable, even miraculous, why did they think, of course we can't do this? How could we? And even today, how quickly do we give up? How easily do we give in to our doubts and figure, the Lord can't help me now? Here is the truth. We are not needy when the Lord is near. We are not needy when the Lord is here. Number two, even though it's an old lesson, it's still true today. We have so little in our grasp, so little in our arsenal, so little in our resources to use, to bless, to help. We want to change the world. We just don't know how. And we look in the mirror and we say, well, just look at me. I'm not all that good looking. I don't have great skills. My talents are small. Have you looked at my house recently? Have you looked at my bank account? Have you looked at him? He can do a lot. She can do incredible things. But me, I cannot do that. I cannot stand up to lead. I cannot teach children in a classroom. I cannot go overseas to be a missionary. I cannot share my story here. I can't speak of Jesus. I can't. And I figure God looks at me and you and us and says, you are all I need. I can do great things with just you. 3, did you notice that Jesus was thankful again? Before he even does an incredible miracle, he has to look to the Father and be grateful just for a moment. And don't forget for a moment, though, that he has already lost John and he's looking forward to his own death. And in this moment, still, with the crowds pressing in on him, everybody needy and maybe whining by this time, out in an open country with daylight fading, he stops to give thanks for a meal. And I ask again, how thankful are we? We'll leave this place and you may go somewhere to a restaurant or go back home or go to somebody's house and you will probably sit down with just a meal, a simple meal. And you may be thinking, this isn't much. This isn't what I really like. I wish I had more or different. I wish I was elsewhere. But while you sit and look down at that simple meal today, would you also look up, or at least in your heart as your eyes are closed, just be thankful for a simple, even small meal? Just be thankful. And 4, God loves to turn the not nearly enough into so much more than plenty. He's good at it. Jesus didn't ask the men to feed the crowd in order to shame them or embarrass them. He was trying to teach them, do you trust me? Card says it was Jesus' habit, then as now, to give impossible tasks to his disciples, now that they should not be defeated, but that they would learn to depend on his perfect provisions. And I think even today, Jesus shares with us the burdens of the world, the needs of the world. We're overwhelmed by everybody needing everything. And instead of focusing on the smallest of what we have to offer, maybe we ought to look more at the Lord and his greatness to deliver. Did you notice here Jesus took the bread, gave thanks, broke it, and passed it, and everybody ate? Reminds you of something else, doesn't it? Something we just talked about. I know they're two very different events, but sounds a lot like that night in that upper room as the sun is setting and he reclines at the table with his chosen and best friends. He is about to die. And he wants this moment with them, and so he takes what's already before them, a small meal, and he breaks it, and he blesses it, and he passes it around, and they all eat it. And this day on this hillside here, or in this shallow by the water, this is, I know, not the same as that night, but I bet it's a foreshadowing of what is coming. Another simple memorial meal, and this meal on this end will be so much more memorialized as he is facing his own death on a cross to save the world. Jesus isn't here today, not in the flesh, not like then. We can't multiply bread. I wish we could. But we have with us the bread of life, the real bread of life, who has come to bring real life to people who will eat on Him, be nourished by Him, be filled with Him spiritually and forevermore. Which brings me to this: do you know the Lord, and have you been saved, filled up with the bread, with the body, with the wine, with the blood, with the salvation that comes only through Jesus? Let's move on, because most of us here are already part of church. This is our family. This is what we do. But let me remind you of our mission. We have something to offer the masses who are crying for bread. And it's maybe not what they want, because it may not be money out of our billfold or all the food you can eat. We have so much more to offer them. And we sometimes feel weak. We're limited. Look at us. We're a small church in the middle of nowhere. But if the Spirit of the Lord is with us and the gospel is ours to share, then we must be ready to share and to give and to do, to bless, even as we are the ones who simply hand it out. The Lord has already done the work. We must send people away, not send people away hungry, but show them, teach them, feed them with the way of salvation. Wright says this is how it works, thinking back then, whenever somebody is close enough to Jesus to catch a glimpse of what He's doing and how they could help. He thinks of those disciples and also us, as he says, we blunder in with our ideas. We offer, uncomprehending what little we have, and Jesus takes our ideas, the loaves and fishes, the money, a sense of humor, time, energy, talents, love, artistic gifts, skill with words, quickness of eyes or fingers, whatever we have to offer. And He holds them there before His Father. And with a prayer and a blessing, He breaks them so they are ready for use, and He gives them back to us to give to those who really need them. What are the lessons from this? Wiersbe says it's simple. First, start with what you have. Second, give what you have to Jesus. Next, obey what He commands. And finally, conserve the results. So let me send you off with this. Our world is hungry, dying of hunger. And we have the gospel of Jesus Christ. We know the bread of life who saves. So let's tell them with compassion. Let's show them who He is. Let's feed them so they can live forever. Let's stand and sing.